An event of unparalleled magnitude has just transpired on the global stage, effectively laying bare the most profound and perilous constitutional crisis that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has encountered since its very inception in the aftermath of the Second World War. Britain's First Sea Lord, General Sir Gwyn Jenkins, has strategically deployed elite Royal Marines to the frozen expanse of Greenland with the specific and calculated intent of resisting American territorial demands, a move that marks the absolute first instance in the entire 75-year history of the alliance, where professional military leaders have actively positioned their forces to defend NATO allies against existential threats. Emerging directly from the alliance's single most powerful member state, I implore you to pause for a moment and truly contemplate the gravity of what this signifies. The professional head of the Royal Navy is currently utilizing Britain's most elite and specialized fighting forces to physically contain and check American imperial ambitions in the high north. Hello, my name is Richard Conway, and if you possess a genuine desire for deep constitutional analysis that reveals precisely how established military institutions step forward to defend democratic principles when political leaders recklessly abandon them, please make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell immediately. While the vast majority of media channels provide you with nothing more than surface-level political theater and sensationalism, right here we rigorously examine the intricate institutional mechanics that ultimately determine how professional military leadership responds when their own alliance partners threaten the foundational principles of the pact. What we are currently witnessing with the execution of Operation Arctic Endurance represents a development that is far more significant and consequential than mere routine NATO training exercises. This constitutes a form of robust institutional resistance against autocratic pressure, manifesting from within the world's single most important global security alliance. The official narrative sounds almost mundane or routine if you have not been closely following the deeper and more complex institutional implications at play. Donald Trump has repeatedly and aggressively threatened to acquire the territory of Greenland through the use of military force or severe economic coercion, casually dismissing the legitimacy of Danish sovereignty and the constraints of international law as mere obstacles to American strategic interests. Meanwhile, in a quiet but decisive countermove, Jenkins has coordinated closely with European allies to deploy Royal Marines to Greenland under the guise of joint exercises designed to demonstrate collective defense capabilities to the world. However, a rigorous institutional analysis reveals exactly what is truly transpiring beneath the surface of these seemingly standard military deployments. When the First Sea Lord deliberately positions Britain's most elite combat forces against explicit American territorial demands, he is actively defending the constitutional structure and legal framework that prevents alliance members from threatening the territorial integrity of one another. Jenkins represents something entirely unique within the upper echelons of NATO leadership, a factor that most mainstream analysis overlooks entirely or fails to understand. As the very first officer from the Royal Marines to ever serve as the First Sea Lord, he brings decades of special boat service, operational experience, and deep Arctic warfare expertise directly into the Alliance's highest naval command structure. This is not merely diplomatic resistance played out in meeting rooms. This is professional military judgment being applied physically to defend the core principles of the Alliance. The Royal Marines, currently operating under Jenkins's direct command, are described officially and accurately as NATO's premier cold weather specialists, possessing decades of rigorous Arctic training and operational experience in exactly the kind of extreme, unforgiving conditions that define Greenland's unique strategic environment. When these specialized forces deploy to such contested territory, they are not making empty political statements. They are applying their professional military expertise to fulfill solemn collective defense obligations. Jenkins's extensive background reveals precisely why this specific deployment carries such immense institutional weight for the future credibility of NATO as an organization. 38 years of dedicated military service, including command of Britain's most elite and secretive Special Forces unit, have prepared him specifically for exactly this kind of complex, high-stakes alliance crisis where professional military judgment must act to constrain volatile political pressure. The constitutional framework that governs all NATO operations has never before faced this specific type of unprecedented challenge originating from within the alliance itself. Article 5 mandates collective defense against attacks on member territory, while Article 1 explicitly commits all members to the peaceful resolution of international disputes and to refraining from threats against other alliance partners. Trump's aggressive demands regarding Greenland violate both of these foundational articles simultaneously, creating a severe constitutional crisis that tests whether NATO's institutional structure retains the capacity to constrain its most powerful member when that member chooses to abandon the alliance's core principles. Jenkins's calculated response suggests that British military leadership fully recognizes this existential threat and intends to resist it firmly through established professional means. Operation Arctic Endurance effectively demonstrates how professional military planning operates under conditions of extreme political pressure. Rather than escalating the confrontation through public statements or loud diplomatic protests, Jenkins utilized standard NATO procedures to coordinate multinational exercises that effectively make American territorial acquisition impossible without physically attacking Allied forces. The operational details of these strategic deployments reveal highly sophisticated military thinking regarding alliance defense under these unprecedented circumstances. Royal Marines, trained specifically for the rigors of Arctic warfare, are positioning themselves alongside Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, French, German, and Finnish forces in joint exercises that emphasize collective defense principles over bilateral political accommodation. Jenkins framed these operations using carefully chosen language that reinforces institutional authority over transient political pressure. His emphatic statement that Royal Marines are ruthlessly focused on mission rehearsals with our closest partners emphasizes professional military preparedness rather than political resistance, thereby making the accommodation of American demands impossible without attacking NATO forces directly. This represents the military bureaucracy asserting its institutional authority against autocratic pressure emanating from alliance members. When professional military planners defend collective defense principles against member state threats, they are consciously choosing constitutional order over the political accommodation of illegal territorial demands. The historical context makes Jenkins's position even more significant for the ultimate institutional survival of NATO. No First Sea Lord in history has ever faced Allied pressure to accommodate territorial seizures against other alliance members, creating entirely new precedents for how military institutions maintain their professional integrity under intense political pressure from allies. Previous NATO disputes concerned policy differences among democracies sharing common values and legal commitments. This crisis concerns whether military institutions can resist autocratic pressure from alliance partners who abandon shared democratic principles while simultaneously demanding institutional accommodation. Jenkins's special boat service background becomes crucial for understanding how elite military training applies to alliance defense under these unprecedented circumstances. Special forces operations require independent judgment, absolute resistance to political pressure, and an unwavering commitment to mission objectives regardless of external demands for accommodation. These operational characteristics translate directly into institutional leadership when political pressure demands the abandonment of professional principles. Military leaders trained to resist enemy pressure during combat operations apply identical resistance principles when Allied political leaders demand the accommodation of illegal territorial acquisition. The Arctic deployment strategy reveals how professional military expertise constrains political pressure through the imposition of operational realities. Greenland's extreme weather conditions, vast territorial scope, and critical strategic positioning require exactly the kind of specialized military capabilities that Jenkins has developed throughout his entire career in Arctic warfare. Royal Marines positioned in Greenland under the banner of Operation Arctic Endurance represent Britain's most elite cold weather warfare specialists operating in their optimal environment against territorial threats that violate international law. Political pressure cannot overcome hard operational facts when professional military judgment determines defensive requirements. Jenkins's emphasis on achieving warfighting readiness by 2029 takes on a profound new significance when viewed through the lens of alliance defense against internal threats. His vision of Royal Navy transformation includes preparation for conflicts that previous NATO planning never anticipated, the necessity of defending alliance members against other alliance members. The institutional implications of this transformation extend far beyond Arctic operations or Greenland's strategic importance. When military institutions prepare for conflicts against alliance partners, they are acknowledging that democratic alliances face existential threats from within their own membership structures. Trump's tariff threats against NATO allies participating in Operation Arctic Endurance demonstrate exactly why Jenkins's institutional resistance matters so critically for alliance survival. Economic coercion utilized to force the accommodation of territorial seizures represents the exact same autocratic pressure that military institutions are designed to resist. Professional military judgment recognizes that the accommodation of economic threats regarding territorial acquisition establishes precedents that make future military threats inevitable. When political leaders can coerce territorial concessions through economic pressure, military resistance becomes the final institutional barrier protecting international law. The multinational character of Operation Arctic Endurance reveals how professional military cooperation operates independently of political accommodation pressures. Military professionals from multiple NATO allies coordinated joint exercises based on shared institutional commitments rather than bilateral political relationships. This institutional solidarity among military professionals demonstrates that NATO's command structure retains enough constitutional integrity to resist political pressure for the accommodation of illegal territorial demands. When multiple alliance militaries coordinate resistance, political accommodation becomes institutionally impossible. Jenkins's leadership in coordinating these multilateral military deployments represents something unprecedented in NATO command relationships. Never before has a First Sea Lord organized alliance-wide military operations specifically designed to contain territorial threats from the alliance's most powerful member. The precedent established by this military coordination will determine whether NATO's institutional structure can maintain collective defense principles when challenged by internal rather than external threats. Jenkins's approach suggests that professional military judgment can constrain autocratic political pressure even when it comes from alliance partners. For British constitutional governance, Jenkins's position creates complex institutional dynamics that strengthen parliamentary oversight of military operations. Royal Marines deployed to resist American territorial demands operate under parliamentary authorization that prevents the accommodation of Allied pressure without democratic approval. Constitutional requirements for parliamentary approval of military deployments create institutional barriers that make political accommodation legally impossible regardless of American economic or diplomatic pressure. Democratic accountability effectively protects military professionalism against political demands that violate constitutional principles. The operational success of these Arctic deployments depends on sustained institutional resistance that can withstand escalating American pressure over extended periods. Jenkins's vision of warfighting readiness by 2029 suggests long-term military planning designed to maintain institutional resistance regardless of political accommodation pressures. Professional military institutions excel at sustained operations under adverse conditions, making them ideal instruments for defending constitutional principles against autocratic pressure that political institutions might find difficult to resist over extended periods. History will ultimately judge whether NATO's military institutions maintain their professional integrity when tested by Allied pressure to abandon collective defense principles for political accommodation. Jenkins's leadership of Operation Arctic Endurance represents military professionalism defending alliance institutions against internal threats to their constitutional foundation. The precedent established by British military resistance to American territorial demands will influence how professional military institutions worldwide respond when powerful allies pressure them to violate foundational principles for political convenience.